All right. How about the biggest surprise of the 2025 PGA Tour season?
You have to get out to more events. You can't keep picking your hometown event for these
Hey,
accolades. Just
it's a
because you don't get out to
62.
more events, you have to. Well, it's the only one I saw, so it must be. That's got to be it. All
It
right,
was
biggest
special.
surprise. It was very special. The biggest surprise was there's no deal between the PGA Tour and the Public Investment Fund
Mm.
of Saudi Arabia. That's going out of left field a little bit. But the reason why is not one, but two trips to the White House to try to get this done. You had the President of the United States trying to broker a deal. You had everyone involved thinking that there was going to be some sort of deal. And not only did they not reach a deal, not only did we not get to a point where golf was finally reunited and we don't have this separation, this golf, this distraction that has been haunting the game for 4 years, but by all accounts, they haven't even spoken since that second meeting in the White House. That is a huge surprise. I could have seen them not coming to a deal where there was just some sort of impasse, but they kept having conversations. I could have seen it going the other way where they started yelling at each other and there was more lawsuits, but neither one of those two extremes happened. Instead, they just picked up their balls and they went home. That to me makes no sense when everything was on the line.
That's a great answer. So great of an answer that I wish I'd come up with it myself. Do you think that Tiger Woods interview in the CBS booth at Torrey Pines, which was the host site this year for the Genesis Invitational, where Tiger Woods sat there, he said, "Oh yeah, we're coming to a deal. We're doing this for golf fans. This is what golf fans have been asking for. Reunification, all the best players back together under one roof." Has that like been scrubbed for the internet? Like I have not seen any footage of that over the past 8 months, and for good reason. Great answer. I'm with you. Like a complete U-turn, about face, stunner. That what the messaging was and what the end result was could not be further from the truth. Biggest surprise for me, I'll stick with the player theme. You already mentioned it, but JJ Spaun. Because he was a player, Rex, who I love this story. And if you are the PGA Tour, and we talked about Brian Rollup and parity and trying to nail down, making sure the pathways are right, making sure there's still opportunities for players to alter their career trajectories. Here was a player, Rex, who is a former college walk-on who last summer thought that his PGA Tour career was over. He was well outside the number, the top 125 in FedEx Cup points. He was talking about contentment. He was talking about how much money he'd made. He's talking about how many friends that he'd made along the way. Like he was already thinking about his next career and moving on. All he does late last summer was rally and do enough to keep his PGA Tour card. The calendar turns, and he has the best year of his career by far. He nearly wins the Sony. He nearly wins in Palm Beach. He loses in a playoff, as I mentioned, at TPC Sawgrass for the Players' Championship. Then he wins the U.S. Open. I know this is a PGA Tour show, but he won the U.S. Open. He nearly won Memphis in the FedEx Cup opener. He makes the Ryder Cup team all the way up to number 6 in the world ranking. Here is a player. We are not doing a most improved section, but if we did, JJ Spaun has to be among the most improved, not just with his driving, but also his putting. And I think even bigger, like mentally, he now has the self-belief that he can do it and the fearlessness that has really not defined his career. If you go back to that Players Championship and JJ Spaun in the media center talking about he's never been at a time in his career where he really wanted the ball, where it was late and he thought that he could own up to that moment and be that guy in the arena. That has completely changed based on what's happened in 2025. You loved to see a player at sort of his advanced age in his mid 30s alter his career trajectory in such a meaningful way. All right, last topic. We can't all be positive, Rex. How about negatively? The biggest disappointment for you in 2025 on the PGA Tour was whom or what?
And to be completely fair, this is through no fault of his own. I want to start out with that in all
Oh,
caps.
that's
This is
a fun
absolutely
caveat.
That's right. Through no fault of his own, Will Zalatoris. And look, this
Mm.
was when he had his first microdissectomy. You and I actually debated about the proper way of pronouncing that. I think you might have gotten it, but I'm going to go with microdissectomy. When he had
Nope,
that first one,
absolutely not. Microdiscectomy.
okay, that thing. When he had that in spring of 2023, it was disappointing because he was on such a trajectory that you thought he is going to be a superstar. He has the talent, he has the personality, he has the drive, and he's already closed out a big event in Memphis. When he came back, I think both you and I were a little giddy about the idea that he was finally healthy. He was going to pick up where he left off. He was going to be this special player to have a second one. And maybe he does come out the other end. You and I both have spoke with people inside his camp, and there's a level of optimism, but the expectations were so high that this superstar that the game desperately needs, they need more new faces to come along that not only play golf well, that's great. I love watching talented players get out and do what they do best, perfect their craft. But he also has the personality. He has the drive. He's fun to be around. And for that to sort of come screeching to a halt again was very disappointing.
It's easy to overlook just where Will Zalatoris was in summer 2022. He was a player who had just won in Memphis. At that time, he was number one in the FedEx Cup rankings, looking at potentially getting a $25 million bonus. He was going to be playing on his very first President's Cup team. He was a player who had just notched his first win after a number of close calls, not just in PGA Tour events, but in major championships as well. Then he had the injury in Delaware, and it's just been a really hard battle ever since. I'm with you. Like, I think Will Zalatoris a couple years ago had future world number one potential. He still might. He still might play on Ryder Cups and President's Cups, but there at least has now been sown a little bit of doubt in his future just because his body has not cooperated. Probably needs to make some swing compensations. Hopefully um, he can stay healthy in 2026 because he is such an immense talent and a great potential addition. I'm with you, just as a spokesperson, an ambassador for the PGA Tour in Will Zalatoris. Another player who was dogged by injury in 2025, unexpectedly to me, was Xander Schauffele. And I know Xander Schauffele won in Japan at the tail end of the PGA Tour season. We didn't know when we were doing our season preview edition, Rex, at the beginning of 2025, that Xander Schauffele was dealing with this rib injury that eventually cost him about 2 months. And he comes back essentially at basically the hardest part that you possibly can. He returned at the Arnold Palmer Invitational for just a gauntlet of tournaments. Luckily, he did not suffer any setbacks. He did not have any other health issues for the rest of the year, but he always seemed like he was playing catch up. It always seemed like he was trying to log enough reps to get sharp. And sure, he still mustered enough decent finishes to finish among the top 50 in the FedEx Cup standings, right? Like, he had a good week at the Open. He had a good week in the Masters as well. He was able to do it, which I think just shows the class that he has. He was able to do it in the biggest tournaments against the best fields in the toughest conditions. Like, that is the caliber of player that Xander Schauffele is. But even though he won in the fall in Japan, it had to have been a massively disappointing season for a player who was coming off a year in 2024 where he'd finally checked off nearly all of his career achievements. Halfway to the career Grand Slam, he'd already had great finishes in the other two majors that he was looking for. The completeness of his game, he was the only player on the PGA Tour in 2024 who was top 40 in every major statistical category, took big steps back with his golf swing, particularly off the tee, took big steps back on the greens as well with his putting. Disappointing year for Xander Schauffele. That win in Japan probably doesn't have quite the tinge of sadness or regret or disappointment that he might have had otherwise. I still think the arrow is pointed up on the X-Man for 2026 and looking forward to seeing what he can do.